Hello, everybody,
Hello,
and welcome to Breaking Story with Young Screenwriters. I'm Alexie,
and I'm Adam.
and he's Adam. And today we are talking about how to start a screenplay. So it's that classic problem where you just don't know how to start. You don't know if you're ready to start, even. You don't know if your ideas are good enough. You don't know if you have the knowledge, or maybe you just literally don't know what kind of scene to start with first. So that's everything that we are going to talk about today. Um, and I guess there's really kind of, in terms of where do we start this conversation, uh, it could be that let's start with kind of like the information that you should have before you start writing a script.
Well, like there are two domains of knowledge, right? One is the frameworks and tools that you will use to write any screenplay that work for you, right? Those are the long-term skills that you learn. And then there's the short-term domain of knowledge, which is what is this project and what do I need to know for this story? And what is this and what is the script and will it be good? Is it a story I should tell? All that stuff. So there's the knowledge you need for this specific project that won't carry over to any other project. And then there's the long-term tools. And when you're writing your first script ever, you're learning both of those things at the same time. You're going to be spending a lot of time building up the tools and mental frameworks, structure stuff that you're going to carry with you into other projects, maybe even as a reaction, like, oh, I didn't like that, I'm going to use this instead, whatever. But whatever works for you to write screenplays, and then the knowledge you need for this story. And I think people get stuck on both things. Sometimes people get stuck when they don't have enough tools or they have too many tools, and then they have like decision paralysis. They can't even think about the project in front of them and what it needs. And then there are people who, they really struggle with, maybe they poked the wrong story. They picked the wrong story. They're for them to tell or there wasn't enough material to actually tell a movie. Some people choose like an idea that like they get really excited about and they spend months outlining it. And then once they actually start typing it, they're like, oh, these characters aren't real and I don't believe this world and I shouldn't be writing this. That's the type of thing that you should explore before you spend months spending time on it. But that's rambling, but there's a whole thing is like there's the tools and the knowledge of how to write screenplays, and then there's how to write this screenplay.
Something I want to say about the tools that I kind of think about is in terms of like your screenwriting knowledge and everything like that, especially as you're approaching your first script or even just like earlier scripts before you're a produced writer, is that there is something to be said for embracing good enough. Like that your knowledge is now good enough and that now you can move forward and you can write this script. Because I feel like it's always going to feel like there's more you can learn, because there is always more you can learn. There's probably a lot of really cool, really helpful things that you can learn at any given time, especially when you're at the beginning and you're just starting to delve into everything. But you hit a threshold pretty quick where you know the basics, you understand the story structure, you understand like this is what it looks like, this is how long it should be, these are kind of like how 3-act structure works, blah, 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 a little more than that. You reach a point where it's good enough. And now the most helpful thing you can do for yourself in advancing your knowledge is not continuing to read screenwriting books. It's not like continuing to, take a bunch of classes or watch a bunch of videos or read a zillion scripts. At some point, the most productive thing you can do for yourself is to just try to write a script. It's kind of like the only comparison I keep thinking of is something I don't know anything about. But I was thinking, like, if you were going to race, right? Like if I was going to race in my car and I don't want to race until I have like the absolute best car ever, then I'm never going to do it. And I'm also like not at the point in my racing skills that it would make that big of a difference. I could probably have the best car on the planet and I still would lose to someone in a much crappier car just because I don't know how to use it yet. So at some point you just look at what you've got and you say good enough and you go for it.
Yeah, I mean, there's experience.
Are.
experiential knowledge, and then there's knowledge you consume consciously, right? Read screenwriting books, take classes, but make sure that you're writing, and so you can get experiential knowledge, because that's what's really. I remember Alexie, you were saying earlier, and plus people say this, but like for every screenwriting book you read, you should write a screenplay with that approach. So, like, you get your applied knowledge together, because you're going to have discoveries and little aha moments on like your process that are valuable, that come about. You're going to make discoveries about writing and your process that other people don't know, or that work for your personality type and don't work for other people. The only way to get that is to make stuff happen. I mean, at a certain point, you do need a base level of knowledge, and I do recommend people doing research onto any sort of medium that they would want to work in. Like if I was going to write a novel, I'd look up, what other people are doing, so I don't avoid stupid mistakes and pitfalls. But like, be conscious in that research, connect with other communities, of writers, to sort of learn from each other, so you are not just completely alone, because you'll learn faster with collective knowledge than you will as an island. And that's the value of those things. But at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to get the benefits of really understanding that knowledge anyway. Like, I remember I read screenwriting books before I'd written a screenplay, and they went in one ear and read out the other. Like, I didn't really understand what Sid Field was talking about. Like, I had this abstraction in my head. Oh yeah, act breaks, whatever. Until I actually like was trying to write, I got what they were saying. So in that sense, when I was writing, it was useful to have that knowledge, because, oh, I understand what that person was saying, right? Like, oh, I'm trying to pivot from the beginning, the middle, or, just whatever language works for you.
Yeah.
You need to do so. No.
Yeah. And, this honestly kind of reminds me of our friend Avi, who's come on here quite a few times in the past. And he wrote a ton of scripts at the very beginning when he was learning, like when he was in school. He wrote a lot of scripts. And then now that he's some years out of college and he's learned more, he's going back and revisiting those scripts and rewriting them with what he knows and making moves with them. So, just because you don't yet know what you don't know doesn't mean don't write it, because it's going to serve you no matter what. It might serve you because maybe it works. Maybe it works and you do something with it. Or maybe it serves you because you learn something and then later on you can come back and make that reach its full potential. So there's a lot of options and really no downside to just writing it out. So I think that's something to keep in mind, is if you're just sitting there and you're like, if you're the kind of person who has like paralysis because you're like, I don't feel like I know enough. Once you've read the basics, once you understand 3-act structure, once you've read a couple screenplays yourself, trust that you got it. You can look up questions as you go.
But, we talk a lot about structure. We talk a lot about the tools all the time. In fact, we talk about that in almost every video. But let's talk about the other side of this, is sort of like, assuming you've written a screenplay before and you understand what 3-act structure is, and you understand all the act breaks, you understand that you need a protagonist with an objective and they have a character arc. Assuming you know all that, what are the stumbling blocks for starting a project and like trying to find out if it works or not?
I'm an expert on those.
Yeah.
I hit a lot of stumbling blocks in starting stuff. I think it really just kind of depends on the person. I know that last week 2 weeks ago, we discussed something related to this about like finishing your scripts and like, how do you know if it's a good idea and latching onto it. And we talked about how Adam and I both have kind of different challenges with that. But for me, I hit a lot of, I have these ideas and I don't know what's worth it. And it kind of becomes that kind of a cycle in my head. So it's like, I know what a script involves, but I don't know what's worth it. And kind of getting bogged down almost in structure. And then Adam, your advice to me was like, basically find the fun again. Like just write the scene from it that you want to write. Like
that's the tip. That's the tip. If you're stuck from like decision paralysis or something, just write a scene, right? Write like a really fun, good scene you'd imagine from a movie, and like, does it work? Are characters creating magic? Is there tension? Is there like, does the concept you have translate to human drama in a way that's like exciting to you and that you feel you can connect with? Like that right there that I just said, that's like the whole game. That's easier said than done, but like that's why a lot of people are sort of the reason why people say write what you know is that problem, right? When people are try to write things they can't connect their imagination to and their emotional like body and life to, and like their core humanity, like that's hard. So like if you are working on something and you feel stuck with it, if you try to write a scene from the most exciting moment you imagine in the story and you don't like it, maybe that's a sign that you should work on something else.
Something else that has helped me very recently is like when I'm really getting stuck in the like, is this idea worth pursuing? Like, is this idea silly? And kind of just thinking through it so much it becomes mush, in the same way that if you say the same word over and over again, it loses all meaning. This is becoming about me, but
yeah, but that's fine.
If that happens to you with your idea, something that has helped me immensely is kind of taking a step back and describing my favorite films at like what they would be described like at this base ideation level. So if it's like, if I'm thinking about Juno, right, it's like a kid in high school gets pregnant and decides to give the baby up for adoption. She needs to find good adoptive parents. It's kind of the like setup for that. And it's deceptively like simple in a way. You know, it's, if you were doing like, I don't know, Breaking Bad, it's like, what is it? A science teacher, a chemistry teacher gets terminal cancer and starts cooking meth to provide for his family. So even these things that have like a lot of really exciting pieces to them sound so plain when they're at that ideation phase, and all of your best ideas will probably sound relatively plain at that stage too. And that's been helping me, is remembering that everything starts as something simple and that you can pull out the fun as you go. And I think, Adam, your advice about writing the scene later in the film is really helpful with proving that to yourself, of where it's like, if I had the idea for Breaking Bad and I'm like, I don't know if this is any good, you could write a scene later of like this teacher is cooking meth and like what goes wrong. Like, how does he handle talking to his wife? Like, how does he handle this? Who does he go to for help? And you can try writing one of those scenes and then kind of testing the fun.
But the one thing I'd add to that is you could have 100,000 writers who are all very talented, or 100,000 too big a word. You could have a writer who's extremely talented and like has great voice and all this stuff. Take the idea of Breaking Bad, before, assuming it didn't exist, and totally not connecting with it and having it suck, and having the wrong angle in, right? Not like that story works because there's some personal humanity put into it, right? Like the whole idea of, okay, well, not what type of chemistry teacher. Chemistry teacher feels like he's been wronged by the world. A genius, scorned genius who's slumming it as a chemistry teacher. Like that's a whole character angle. But you could have just taken like an average chemistry teacher in New Mexico.
Right.
And it would have been a completely different story. I'm not saying better or worse, but like the reason why that story has power isn't just, oh, it's conceptually good for like plot and drama and that could be interesting. It's the development. What you were saying, like everything takes development. Just the simple idea. Like I don't believe that there are bad ideas, but I don't believe there are bad ideas that can't be elevated, right? It has to do with the, like, if you just, like, if you're building a house and the foundation and you obsess, oh my God, this foundation isn't blowing me away. Well, it's a fucking foundation. Build the house a little bit, you know, like, you can, you know, just trust yourself for that. Let me answer this question, both of these questions. But do you find that index cards, do you find that writing on index cards as opposed to legal pad helps with scene process? it depends on the person. It's really whatever helps you. I personally am not a big index card person, but some people swear by them, right? Alexie loves them. I love just the journal. I love the tactile. This is a book. I'm filling it out. I don't, because the moment it's an index card, it's real and there's like structure and you have to like think about the order of the index card.
That's a good point.
So that's my opinion.
I don't index card until late. Like I index card very late. To me, that's my outlining process is index cards. And the way that I front load everything is basically that when I'm to the point of outlining, I know my story. Like I am no longer just kind of like winging it. It's like I have a pretty strong understanding of exactly how the story is going to go. So early in the process, if I was just going to write a scene to see if I enjoy it, I would just write it in a notebook or type it on a computer. That's how I would just approach it like that. But if it's later and you're like building up to stuff, I use note cards, one note card per scene, kind of lay out what the scene must accomplish, give myself a little prompt, and then use that to help me write the scene. So that's how I use index cards and scenes. I find that helpful because then you have a prompt. You never have like a blank page in front of you because you've made yourself prompts with the index cards. That's how I like to use them.
And we have this other question, which is, can you talk about toxic relationship stories versus healthy love stories? Which one does better with readers and viewers? Brainstorming ideas for sci-fi love story. The answer is both and neither, right? Like it depends on the story. Like I have seen some toxic relationship stories that, do extremely well. And I've seen some healthy love stories that do extremely well. It depends on the specific characters and the specific writer's lived experience and imagination. You can tell the worst story ever based on a toxic relationship. You could tell the most emotional, fantastic story ever based on a toxic relationship. It depends on it, kind of what I was going back to about there's no bad ideas. It's just like undeveloped, right? Like that's too notional and big picture. It's like kind of like saying, oh my God, should I write? You could say that in general, toxic relationships have more conflict than healthy love stories, but healthy love stories are more escapist. So it's more appealing it's more about appealing to different people and kind of knowing your genre. If you were going to write a Hallmark movie rom-com about a toxic relationship, you probably won't do very well because you have to think about, well, what is the promise of the genre of the movie I'm writing in? Like, am I appealing to moms who just want to relax on a Saturday and they're burned out and this is just their fun candy? Like, well, don't do the toxic relationship maybe, or unless it's, for example, that's like more of a, that's what it's about, like a Lifetime Woman in Jeopardy story, right? Like there's a different appeal to either type of story. It just depends on the genre you're working in, who you are as a writer, and what you bring to it uniquely. Because like Sylvester, there are movies there's a story out there that only you can tell. I know that's a cliche, but it is actually true. And people don't think about it that way. But if you're thinking in terms of, oh, I'm going to write a healthy love story set in a science fiction setting, well, maybe that's the wrong way to approach it. I would highly recommend thinking more about, Stephen King actually has this advice. Don't talk to me about genres. Don't talk to me about high concept, whatever. Give me a situation.
Yeah.
People in a situation. Start thinking about people in a situation and then start thinking about the genre rather than the other way around. Because you could have what's the situation of Alien, right?
Yeah.
There are like 15 people on a spaceship, and there's an ancient alien gets stuck inside. One by one, they're getting killed off. They have to get rid of the alien and survive, right? That's a situation, right? That's a situation that could have been done very badly. Could have been a situation that could have done very well. You could have done that as a comedy. You could do it as a horror. There's a version of Alien that's very funny. It depends on what you're doing. So, but the situation will help you, and start thinking in those terms. All right, I'm rambling.
No, I would also say though that, so when you tell me that you have a toxic relationship story, toxic has conflict built in. And as John likes to say, all drama is conflict. And so like when we watch shows, we watch for drama, and drama is conflict, and having a toxic relationship is going to have conflict baked in. Whereas a healthy relationship, a healthy love story might not have conflict baked in.
It's more like a coming of age story. Like it's about the becoming.
Yeah.
Right. Like a healthy love story, I would imagine, is more about two unfulfilled people find fulfillment in each other. Right.
Yeah.
But the unfulfillment is the conflict until they meet each other or whatever.
Or so it's like, is, I guess, kind of the difference the distinction I'm trying to make is that when you have a toxic love story, the toxicity really becomes a lot of the drama. Whereas if you have a healthy love story, you're going to find the drama in other things. Like what Adam was saying, like it might be like their own insecurities, it might be them figuring out how to be together. It's not necessarily that the relationship itself is creating the drama. You're going to have to find it elsewhere. And so I would really think about, what do you want to explore? Like what else is happening in this love story? And I shared one that I really love with you. I just posted it. That is, I believe, the original script for Passengers. And I want to talk a little bit about Passengers quickly, because Passengers was a Blacklist script. It's a sci-fi that has now been made into a movie. But basically the story is there's this big ship of people going to a faraway place, and they're all put into cryo sleep. And they're supposed to wake up once they reach the destination, and sleep the entire hundreds-year journey. Well, one guy, because of a mistake, gets woken up early.
That's a good situation right there.
It's an excellent situation. He is woken up early, and he is the only one awake on this entire ship, and he can't go back to sleep. He's going to have a lifetime alone on this ship with him and like the robot bartender. And so what he chooses to do is he chooses to wake up a woman. And the whole story is about their love, or like their relationship in this really complicated situation where she doesn't know that he woke her up early. And that now he's basically condemned her to live alone with him the rest of her life on this ship. And it was a Blacklist script, I believe, around like 2011. And it was just like a favorite of everyone who read it. But it was like notorious because people said that they're never going to make a sci-fi romance like that. That is too big of a budget for a romantic film. And then what did they do? They cast Jennifer Lawrence and Chris Pratt, changed the ending, and finally made it. And it didn't really work from what I've heard. But that original script is an absolute beautiful, beautiful script. Love it. And I would highly suggest reading it. But that's an example, because you asked for examples of romance sci-fi things. That's one that I think really is exceptional.
But like with sci-fi, also I would add that there's kind of a, not responsibility, but like I challenge you to think deeply about the concept in terms of like not just as a setting. Oh, it's in the future, science fiction stuff. Like, what is the idea that this is exploring about humanity? Like that's the thing that I think about great science fiction always does, which is why Star Wars is a fantasy and not a science fiction.
Eternal Sunshine is another good.
Yeah, that's a great one. That's a toxic relationship.
Yeah, a toxic relationship.
And it's a simple science fiction idea, right? Like, and the idea that it reveals about human nature says if you could erase if you could erase your own memory of some particular person, would you, and what are the consequences? That's a great, and what better character? Somebody who's heartbroken. Two people are heartbroken. They're erasing each other. That's really good drama. It's a good situation, but it's revealed. The science fiction concept isn't just arbitrary. It's revealing something to us about who we are. That's the good shit.
Yeah, it's got to tie in. It can't just be two lovers in Jurassic Park.
Eternal Sunshine for the Spotless Mind is one of the best movies ever in American movies of the 2000s. It's fantastic.
It is very, very good. I would highly recommend. And yeah, I think whatever you do, make sure that the sci-fi concept you pick is drawing out the conflict in the relationship.
Yeah.
However you approach it, it should be amplifying it.
So in Eternal Sunshine, the concept of there's this treatment that you can erase somebody's memories you can erase your memories of somebody. Well, your ex-girlfriend, who you're having a contentious breakup with, erased you. What do? She has no memory of who you are. Well, I'm going to erase her back, right? And the whole second half of the movie takes place inside of his head, and he realizes, oh my God, during the treatment, oh my God, this meant something. If I lose these memories, I won't have learned anything. I don't want to erase this person. So it's this great. It's a great movie.
And it's a relatively like low budget sci-fi too, which I think is really cool.
I mean, medium budget, but yes, it has all-star cast. You've got
not the cast. I meant like the idea itself.
Oh yeah, it's not like a $100 million superhero movie or something. Yeah, for sure.
No, the cast was killing it. Cast was not cheap, but the technology and stuff, like blocking people on Instagram.
I actually really, really like when science fiction goes small.
I do too. It's like it's the thing that we talk about quite a bit, which is complexity versus depth, right? Yeah. You can have like a hugely complex sci-fi world where you build out all these intricate and interesting things that's really fun. But then that in a 2-hour movie limits how deep you can go because you have to convey all that information. Whereas in a novel, your book can be 600 pages long. That's right. You can do complex things and have depth because you have that space. But just as a practical limitation of a film, you can't really have both intense complexity and intense depth. You really have to pick or choose. And so if you want to have something that's really emotional, like a romance, a love story, then finding a way to get your sci-fi bit in there, but not that complex, just one simple idea so that you can go deep with its ramifications into the relationship. I feel like that is a sweet spot, in my opinion. I mean, it's kind of like Inception. Like that was really, really cool. That was kind of a complex idea.
It's one idea, though. Yeah. Like, what if you can go into people's dreams and steal things, right?
But even then, it's like because we spent so much time with everybody else and learning this stuff, we didn't really get to know, like, we understood.
We only had time to get to know one character. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like we got to understand like the main damage of Cobb, but it wasn't necessarily like that we know everything about this man. It was all we had time for, and it was still a great film, but it's just a choice you should make. Or a choice you have to make, rather. Yeah, so I guess to tie that back in to how to start a film. One version of the...
Yeah, sorry.
I guess to me, it's the conflict idea, right? It's like making sure that the idea itself can be simple as long as you have given yourself opportunities for conflict in that simple idea.
Like a situation that characters you connect to can inhabit that create conflict, right? I think the situation is a good way to think about it because then you're forced to think about conflict. What is a dramatic situation other than somebody in a dilemma, somebody who has to deal with something. Something's happened to somebody. You know, it's like inciting incident. The idea of inciting incident is built into that. I mean, I guess you could be very vague and like two people meet on a boat, but like ask yourself questions of that. Sort of you could develop that. It's kind of like goes back to the idea of like, well, two people meet on a boat could be, you know, the best movie you've ever seen in your life or the most boring student film where nothing happens, right?
Is it Titanic? Is that what you're pitching me right now?
Well, no, wait. Yeah, no, right. You're right. Two people meet on a boat. Literally Titanic, the second most popular film of all time. You know, two people meet on a boat. Or it could be, you know,
two people meet on a sinking boat.
And they just sort of chat about life for a minute. And then one of them gets coffee and it ends, you know. and sort of wistfully you wonder, life is so strange. No. But like Titanic is a great dramatic situation. I mean, not only is there like cross-class love story, she's stuck in to a fiance she doesn't want to marry when she gets to the end of the journey. He's this artist who's living free, and she sees so much. It's her story, by the way. She has the autonomy and she has the dilemma. Do I leave my mother and our financial future in jeopardy, my family's financial future in jeopardy by not marrying this guy? Or by marrying this guy, do I secure my family's future? Or do I follow my heart and sort of dream with this young man who represents like possibility and freedom? Right? All while the boat's fucking sinking, So
did you know that James Cameron was haunted by the fact that people kept saying they could have both fit on the door? So he recreated the scene and realized that they could have both fit on the door and admitted that he should have made the door smaller. That poor man.
I mean, I love the fact that he's has so many resources to just sort of do that.
Yeah, just go exploring under the sea and to test outdoors.
Yeah. But like, it's about development. It's about development, but make sure that there's a spark. Make sure that there's something that excites you. Make sure you write that scene or whatever it is that it gets you to feel like, oh my God, I can do this and this feels good. Like so many people they actually start underdeveloped material. So I don't know.
It's like every time you have a concept, just ask yourself, what other choices could I make that would make this more dramatic, that would give this more conflict? So love story. One is a detective and one's a criminal. All right, now you have conflict. And then you just keep kind of spiraling it out, You could add in some sci-fi stuff as long as it is complicating or creating conflict in that initial relationship, so it's tied to it. It's going to feel love of peace, and you can keep going. But everything should be creating more dramatic conflict. That's my thought there.
Well, on that note, what do we have next week?
I am not here next week, so we are off next week. But then when we
are after, I meant next time we meet,
when we come back, we are going to be looking at the idea of, wouldn't 3-act structure make my script really boring?
That's a good question.
Yeah, it's a question a lot of people.
So that conversation will be focused on how to find the spark in a specific cohesive structure.
Yeah. Like how do you make something that's still surprising and unique using a structure that we've seen for many, many years, over and over and over? And it's a tricky thing, but it's going to be a fun conversation. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. And by the way, if you like this time better, today we are at 5:30 because of just scheduling issues. But usually we're at 4. If you prefer this time, please let us know. Or if there's another time that'd be better for you, please let us know. We're always open, trying to see what works for everyone. All right. Hope you have a great rest of your week and a good weekend.